start this party. You all ready to rock and roll?
Ready to go?
Hell yeah.
All right, let's get rolling. Welcome to the smartest people in the room. We are so glad you are here with us, and just by showing up, you are already demonstrating your very own smarts. Today, we are thrilled to present two rock stars from the world of music, gaming, and Major League Soccer. And I promise you will leave today smarter and more inspired than you arrived. More on that in just a moment. Before we get started, let me take care of some business. First, to the audience, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat window. The reason we do these webinars is twofold. First, we want to showcase really smart people and the amazing work they do day to day in the entertainment industry. But the second reason is a bit more nuanced. Many of you know that I am a music industry headhunter. I place music executives in roles throughout the industry. So by definition and function, I help people connect with companies. In this series, my goal is to help you make more connections, and I invite you to take full advantage of that opportunity. Specifically, I invite you to engage with the speakers and the other attendees in the chat of the Zoom. Please introduce yourselves, share your LinkedIn profile, say hello to your friends, and make some new ones. And ask questions of our speakers. We will try to address as many of those as possible during the session. Also, please make sure your chat is set to address speakers and attendees. I want to thank our sponsors, for without their support, we could not keep this program free. Thank you to First Horizon Bank, Bufkin Baker, Four Roses Bourbon, the Tennessee Entertainment Commission, Lightning 100, Tennessee Brew Works, Moo TV, Jive Printing, Project Music, and Cushmaster's brand of CBD products. So let's get down to business. In today's host seat, we welcome my good friend and alumnus of Who Knew, Steve Schnur. Worldwide executive and president of music at Electronic Arts, Steve has been label and music publishing company president, TV executive producer, music supervisor, professional musician, songwriter, composer, record producer, and more. Along the way, he's moved the needle and changed the game in the fields of music, movies, television, sports, video games, and digital interactive entertainment around the world. His hands-on approach to composer selection, orchestration, and production of well over 100 EA soundtracked albums, including original scores for Battlefield, The Sims, Madden NFL, Mass Effect, Dragon Age, Medal of Honor, and Star Wars Battlefront, with world-famous composers including Mark Mothersbaugh, Michael Giacchino, Junkie XL, Steve Jablonsky, and Hans Zimmer, has earned EA over 50 soundtrack nominations in the last 15 years. His entrepreneurial vision has transformed both the industry and the culture, and he's been responsible for internationally launching artists that have included 30 Seconds to Mars, Robin, Fall Out Boy, Kanan, Katy Perry, Imagine Dragons, Kings of Leon, The Weeknd, Florence and the Machine, and many more. Welcome, Steve. So glad to have you back. And joining Steve as today's featured guest is Ayre, of Chief Executive Officer of the Nashville Soccer Club, the MLS Soccer's Major League Soccer's 24th club, which began its participation in 2020. Since his arrival in 2018, Ian has been tasked with building the entire club from the ground up. In addition to overseeing the club's business and soccer operations, he's responsible for the development of the club's new and permanent stadium at the Fairgrounds in Nashville, which will be the largest soccer-specific stadium in the U.S. when it opens its doors next year. Ian has an extensive level of career experience gained predominantly in the areas of sports, media, and technology. Following 10 years of active military service in the British Royal Navy and professional experience in consumer electronics with Pace Microtechnology, he was involved in the takeover of Huddersfield Town Football Club, serving as chairman and chief executive of the English Football League Championship Club. He transformed the club's commercial revenues and completed the final stages of construction of their new stadium and the revitalization of the playing squad. Following his time at Huddersfield Town FC, Ian became the founding managing director of Premium TV Limited, a digital sports media company which secured the digital media rights for all 72 Football League clubs and a host of Premier League teams. On leaving Premium TV, Ian returned to Asia to help build the Asian sports marketing organization called Total Sports Asia. In 2007, He returned to the UK to take up a role with Liverpool Football Club, the club he had supported since childhood. Over his 10 years at Liverpool, he was responsible for building the club at all levels. After initially securing a record-breaking sponsorship deal for the club, he went on to restructure the entire commercial, operational, and football elements of the business, as well as overseeing the successful 120 million quid stadium expansion. During his time at Liverpool, Ian also served on the UEFA Competitions Committee as an elected member, and in 2017 was voted Premier League Chief Executive of the Year. He stepped down as Chief Executive Officer in February of 2017. Please welcome these two rock stars to the smartest people in the room. Please take it away, Steve.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom. And hello to my friend Ian. Transparency here. Ian and I know each other well. My two teams that I'm proud to be a supporter of from my heart, considering I am in the sports business as much I'm in the music business, are Liverpool and Nashville SC. So Ian has a special place in my heart for many, many reasons. I also wanted to show you what I keep on my desk here, which is a painting. This is actually a little painting someone did for me, which shows you the gap that I've been concentrating on forever and a day, the gap between the UK and the state of Tennessee when it comes to music, when it comes to sport, and so on. A few things to open up here with. No notes, just talking here. But when I refer to the game, I'm going to use the word football a lot. For those of you here in the US, assuming many in Nashville, I'm not talking about the Titans, okay? I'm talking about what we call soccer here, but I've been in the FIFA business for a very long time. And so that's what we're talking about here. I also want to briefly talk about the sport itself of football. It is referred to and deserves to be called the beautiful game, a beautiful game. It took me a while, like many of you probably, who was not brought up with the sport. I was brought up with the NFL. I was brought up with baseball. I was brought up with basketball. And I didn't understand that at first, what made it so beautiful. And it is in my and many people's opinion, art. It's dance. It belongs in the same category of music. It's truly a beautiful, beautiful sport. Ian, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the saying as it goes is that, I'm going to see if I get this right, rugby is a hoodlum sport played by gentlemen, and football, soccer, is a gentleman's sport played by hoodlums. Is this correct?
That's pretty close. Yep, that's pretty close.
So there's a history here to this sport that we don't really have in the United States, because, and we'll get into some of the depth of it momentarily, but as a person from the UK, the sport is not anything new. It has serious depth and background and culture and angst and love. Again, not even written in my questions for you, just off the top of your head. Can you give me, just everybody here, a brief overview of what football means to the rest of the world? We'll get to what it is becoming here, but what have we missed over the last 30, 40, 50, 60 decades?
Yeah, I think, look, as was mentioned, I grew up in Liverpool. So if you're going to pick a city to be born in that loves this game, Liverpool would be right up there with the best of them. And I think, the question, like, what does it mean, or what have we missed? It's the tribalism, I think. I think that will come. It's coming. We see that with our team here, and I see it around MLS. I think the closest thing I've seen in the US to the tribalism of football, as I know it, is college football here, is this deep alumni support, fervent, but it's almost more deep-rooted than that. I mean, it really is everything. I used to use this when I was at Liverpool. I used to use this line when I was doing presentations to say that, in the city of Liverpool, if you're at the top of the food chain, the team means a lot. You're buying great seats and you're going to games and you're subscribing to pay TV to watch it. And at the bottom of the food chain, it's everything. I mean, people will give, everything they have to show up to see that team. And there's so many stories of fans who, Liverpool get into the Champions League final or other finals, and people, guys giving up their job because they can't get the time off work and selling their car to go to Rome for the final and not telling their wife till they get back. And I mean, these are real, true living stories of, it's in their heart, and and it's I've never seen anything like it anywhere else in the world. I mean, I've seen it in other parts of the world, but there's nothing quite like it when it literally means it. And for people who have less hope or less opportunity than others, sometimes it's the one thing they can look forward to, it being a success for them. So when their team crosses that white line on a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday or whenever, that, what, I've got something here that I might win at, that, all around me might be sort of not so great, but my team might go out there and win it for me and make me feel proud. And I think the game here is starting to see that, and it's fantastic.
It reminds me a bit of what rock and roll was to me when I was a kid, be it Zeppelin, be it Ozzy, whatever the case may be. Everybody has their own. It was the whole world to me. I enveloped my entire being in that band. And whether that band, I heard them on the radio or I played them in my bedroom, or there was some article on them or a poster I would hang on my wall, nothing else better defined me than rock and roll. And I would say that what I've learned as an adult, thank you FIFA, and I mean the video game and the sport itself, for giving me the opportunity to finally realize that love, deep, deep, deep relationship with the team, that as much as I love, certainly the Titans and others, it's a different kind of love. You're right. It represents truly who you are, and you're proud and you're ready to live and die by it. And sometimes, if you look at the history of the sport in places like Eastern Europe, some people died by it. I mean, there was literally tribalism to a different degree. I remember, just for everyone here, Ian and I oversaw the writing of the theme that Judah and the Lion did for Nashville SC. And we took a note from the book of Liverpool and Gary and the Pacemakers. And what we did with the band, and let's talk about it in a moment here, was instead of doing what is so typical to so many teams, we worked with the band to create a love song. And I say that without apology. It's a love song, just like Ayre and the Pacemakers sings You'll Never Walk Alone. And you have how many? 100,000 people singing it to the team and the team singing it back. Hopefully that represents the relationship between a football team and the fans, and it's vice versa. Through thick and thin, we are here for you. I love that the theme to Nashville SC is sticking. I see it. I see everybody singing it. What are your thoughts on that? What are your memories on that? That was quite an undertaking because that was from scratch.
Yeah, it was. And you're being very modest, Steve. I mean, it was, you said to me way back when I think I was employee number one, I had no staff. We had lunch and we were talking about You'll Never Walk Alone. And we were saying, we got to write a song, and you did so much work for us there. So we'll be eternally grateful for that. I think it's something that will grow and continue to grow. I think, as you say, most teams adopt an existing tune or song, and to write our own or have our own written by Judah and the Lion. And, it's so Nashville, right? I mean, we're in the Music City. You've got to have your own song, right? The last thing the Music City wants to do is rip somebody else's song off, right? Yeah. And my favorite moment used to be the opening day of our first ever game at Nissan Stadium, 60,000 people, Judah performing it live, and he climbs into the crowd in the supporter section and is singing it live. It's incredible. But actually that changed last week because we had a fan event downtown in Nashville in Germantown. And I never thought he could top that moment. And it was on a much shorter scale, but he was part of a panel we were interviewing. We had the commissioner of MLS there. We had Judah, we had Walker Zimmerman, our great player. And they were asking questions. And at the end, he just said, any more questions? And nobody had any more questions. And Judah said, just going to grab my guitar. And he grabbed his acoustic guitar, and somebody said, we'll go get you a microphone. He said, I don't need a microphone. He climbed on the table in the bar we were in, about 300 fans in the bar. And he just started playing it. One of our fans, who's the guy who calls a lot of the chants, got up with him. And everybody in that room was singing it. And it's the start. It's an emotional start of a long-term journey to really, really own that song and make it ours. And you know, every game, as you said, fans sing it. More and more fans are coming. More and more people are singing it. And that's how it should be. It should grow organically. And but it's pretty incredible.
Well, listen, you live now in Nashville, which is on its way, I believe, if not there already, to being truly a global city. You come from Liverpool. I don't know, have any bands ever come from Liverpool? I can't think of any, but I think maybe it has a reputation of being somewhat a music city.
There's a small four-piece band, but they're not very well known.
Small, exactly. I mean, can Nashville SC eventually help bring the MLS into a global landscape? I mean, I truly believe that Nashville is much different than it was 10, 20 years ago. You mentioned Nashville people in Berlin and Japan and the UK, and there's a, you know, it puts a smile on so many people's face. What about the MLS? Can that be globally known? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think, look, one of the reasons I came here and was excited about coming here and doing what I'm doing amongst many was this league's, every metric in this league is on the increase. So, you know, if you think back 5, even as short as 5 or 6, 7 years ago, that the league was still being thought of by people as a place where old European players went to finish their careers and make a few dollars more towards the pension. Even that's changed. You know, you're seeing a lot of players come from leagues around the world at a young age into the league. You know, we just signed a kid, Ake Loba, recently. He's from the Ivory Coast, played in one of the top teams at Monterrey in Mexico, and now at 23, he's come into Nashville to play in MLS. And you've seen that before. And 2 years ago, Miguel Almiron made a similar journey from Latin America into the US at Atlanta, and then was sold to Newcastle United for $25 million or something. So it's, even at that stage, it's emerging. And then the crowds, I mean, the energy, we had 60,000 at our opening game. Atlanta are getting those sort of numbers on a regular basis. Teams like Portland Timbers, LAFC, Seattle, big crowds. So it's kind of, when I speak to my buddies back home, it's not what they think. It's already a big thing with big audience, making a lot of noise, both metaphorically and in reality. And I think the US national team has a big part to play, you know, in the global part, and Nashville and every other team. But I think you're right. I think teams like LA, Miami, and more recently Nashville are recognized names around the world. So we have an opportunity that some cities may not have in the longer term. And then the World Cup coming here in 2026, I think, will be another big bright light shine on US soccer or football. And I think, like I say, I'm hugely excited about the game in this country. Some people watch it and think it's a bit slower, but then when they realize that you're playing in 100-degree heat in the summer, they kind of understand why the players aren't running quite so fast. But you know, it's a real exciting league with a lot to play for. No dominant teams. There's lots of exciting pieces to it.
You know, football, professional football, has tried to get a financial footing, a successful footing in America for decades. When I was a kid, Pele came to play for the New York Cosmos, and I went to see it once. I didn't understand it, but I knew it was important somewhere else in the world. So what is it about this country that has posed such a challenge in the past? I mean, it's been odd to say the
Yeah,
least.
I think, look, that, it's always hard to be the last person to the table, right? So I think when football and hockey and all these other sports have such a, baseball, basketball, such a dominant presence, I think it was always hard to, find your right time in the year to play. So playing through the summer is a really, wasn't where they started, but seems to be the right piece, because you're competing with baseball, but not really, if you know what I mean. So come September, when the American football season starts, the media gravitates hugely in that direction. But I think a couple of other things. I think the growing influence of different ethnic groups and communities that have come into the US, where, let's face it, other than this country, pretty much every other country in the world, football is the number one sport. So I think that's helped. I think the growing immigrant community and people bringing the game and enjoying the game and bringing their love for the game. I think the amazing work that people like the Commissioner Garber, who's been there 24 years of the 25 years previously at NFL, I think they've really trodden a tough road, but kept fighting and kept growing it and kept lifting things up, and it's finally found its place. And I think finally, I would say one of the game changers for me has been the growth of the number of soccer-specific stadiums, because there's light years of difference between watching this sport in a American football stadium versus watching it in a football or soccer-specific stadium. No comparison, in my opinion, and
You're very right.
adds to the experience, and people are seeing that now.
You're very right. I mean, the Cosmos, when I was a kid, played in Giant Stadium. I remember going there, and it felt, you're right, it's a much different experience, having seen football here now, MLS football being played in Colorado, being played in both stadiums, in LA, being played, of course, in Nashville. It's a much different and intimate experience.
Well, and also for size, when you're starting out, you think of a new team like us playing in a football stadium that holds 70,000 people when you're just starting to try and build an audience. That'd be like some up and coming band in your industry going and playing at Madison Square Garden for their first gig. It's kind of like the atmosphere. They might play as well as they'll ever play, but the atmosphere is never the same when it's half full versus when the place is full. And so we've all been working really hard to create that, and people way before us that have contributed so much. But it's a real thing now with big stadiums full of people. And I saw last few years. I mean, Atlanta United. Who'd have thought when they brought this? They built an incredible stadium for football and soccer, and the soccer team's getting as big, sometimes bigger crowds than the football team. I think that's a real indicator of where the sport is headed.
Well, I agree with you, and that has a lot to do with my opinion of, correct me if I'm wrong, some of the reasons why, in my opinion, doing what I do, the growth of football, soccer has been on such a trajectory that like this, and I believe it's just not stopping. And I do believe that football, MLS football, and probably the basketball will be the two dominant sports in the United States in the next 10, 20, 30 years, especially when you have an older average demographic for baseball in particular, and certainly for the NFL, which is trying like crazy to get the next generation of season ticket holders on board. But currently it's well in the 50s, I believe, is the average demographic for the NFL. I think some of the other reasons why, correct me if I'm wrong, football, soccer, I keep doing that for the benefit of everybody, is on such a big trajectory of growth here are the following. Number one, I think the reason why it wasn't happening for so long was there weren't commercial breaks, and we weren't used to that. We needed, it's still odd for me to go to a NFL game and see them just stop. They finally figured that out, how to do that. Number two, I think the flattening of the world suddenly and the traveling of teams such as Liverpool and Man U and others traveling the world now and creating fans, and you're able to see now on NBC and ESPN those Premier League games. Frankly, and a bit self-serving, I think the game itself of FIFA has it seems to be a major point of entry for many people to love the sport, as opposed to when we were kids, we would actually kick the ball. Now it's a virtual experience. Like it or hate it, that is the truth. I think FIFA, the game, represents a global culture that everybody feels they can be a part of. And I think one of the most important things, frankly, is it's a next generation sport. I think, listen, we can blame it on NFL injuries or whatever the case may be, but it is a sport for younger people in the United States. There's a growth. I don't know the numbers with the AYSO here in the US. People are putting their kids in soccer, football, before they're putting them in Pop Warner football. So I don't know if you agree with those, but I mean, those are some of the things I've seen that have really and suddenly magically turned 14 and 16 and 20-something-year-olds into massive football fans.
Yeah, I think all of those things are true, Steve. I think, it's definitely a younger, more digitally savvy, more affluent sport. It's also more inclusive. It represents more communities at player level and at supporter level. And I think, when I think of my grandchildren as it is now, I used to think about my kids, but now it's my grandchildren. And I think you think about the attention span and you know this better than anyone from the gaming world, that the attention span that a 12, 14-year-old has now is tiny. And you see that in viewing periods for digital. So the idea that, that a kid of that age is going to get locked into a game that lasts 3 or 4 hours and has a break every, 10 seconds or whatever it is, versus something that's highly intense, 90 minutes, very affordable, is something that MLS kind of ticks a lot of boxes for. In our new stadium we open next year, I was talking to somebody this morning, we'll have a ticket range from $12 upwards, for $12 for kids in a family section. You'd be able to bring a family of 4, and this is true of all of MLS. Bring a family of 4, maybe for less than $100. I mean, you can't go to any other major league sport and do that. It will be very family orientated. It will be very exciting and intense. And we look at our audience, even at Nissan now, and it's a lot of families, a lot of younger kids, a lot of groups of, and very, very eclectic in terms of the diversity, very inclusive. And they're all things that younger people really care about, like, right. And so, and as you say, the video game, the FIFA game is like just transformed it in other levels. So I think it's all of those things. And we get very excited about who our audience is, because you're building something that will keep growing because it's very young, and we make it affordable. So I predict great things for it.
Well, I think one thing that's, it's somewhat critical, but it's true, is that other sports have played into the suites, the people in the suites, for so long. It feels like they've cared more about the people in the Budweiser suites than the fans in the stands. And I've never gotten that from football, ever. It feels like it's about the people in the stands, the fan supporter section, families showing up. It's always geared towards the fan. It's a community. It extends itself into a community. It's much less about whoever's in some fancy suite somewhere. And I think it's a key difference. And I don't know if people recognize that. Hopefully now you will. But even when it came to advertising in the past, or music in the past, it was always about the older fan, somebody who could shell out the cash for the season ticket in the suite. And there was always that kid, or many of them, who are sitting there going, what about me? And I think that's where the MLS and football in general really, really, really wins. I think
that's so true, Steve. I went to my first game at Liverpool when I was 6 years old, 1969, with my dad, and he took me on the Kop, and I was so small. I'm still not that tall, but I was so small, and it was all standing. 24,000 people in one stand, standing. 6 years old, and he literally had to hold me up And then they had like these crush barriers stop you all sort of falling forward. He sat me on there, and it's something I genuinely can still remember bits of that day. And it's just, it kind of becomes a thing. You're like, I don't really know why yet at 6 years old, but I really want to keep doing this. And it never left me. And I was very fortunate to work, be the CEO at Liverpool and the CEO and chairman at Huddersfield, and here at Nashville and Munich and all those great things. I never had, as all of the great things I got to do of being on the field with the team and getting the trophy and all those things, none of them even come close to the experiences I had in the crowd with my buddies, singing and chanting and drinking and probably misbehaving quite a lot. But that's the memories. They're the memories that you build, and you belong. Bill Shankly said something about, if you're on the COP, if you're a member of the COP, you're part of a big family, and they're there for you, and they're always there for you. And there's thousands, and they're loyal and true to you, and that's so true. And I haven't been to a Liverpool game for a couple of years because I'm here, but I feel like you can walk back there any day and go stand there and feel part of that family again. So it's very special.
Well, I've been to a few in the last couple of years pre-COVID, and I know that feeling well, and I wasn't brought up there. Liverpool was always, because of the Beatles, it was always a shining spot somewhere in the world, but I felt that pride from day one. The only time I didn't feel that level of pride had nothing to do with Liverpool. It was that I wanted to introduce your successor, who's one of my best friends, who introduced us originally, Peter Moore, to Paul McCartney when he played Liverpool, only to find out that Paul is an Everton fan and not a Liverpool fan. And it broke my heart. Broke my heart. A team is essentially a brand, give or take. So how do you maintain this brand during a bad season? I mean, you were Liverpool a long time. Liverpool is a winning team, but how do you deal with that brand? How do you deal with it? I mean, many of us watch TV about brand, certain teams in the UK that are on HBO and Apple TV. How do you deal with that?
Well, Liverpool's a very unique club, let's say. And the first place I would start is, if you're the CEO of Liverpool and you call it a brand, you probably won't make it out of the city.
Fair enough.
I think, of course, it has a brand, and you have to develop and manage that brand. I'd say two things. One is that certainly in the UK, and I think that's true here, I'm feeling it in Nashville, is that I always thought the club was like, and actually the government in the UK did this more recently, it's like a community asset. So John Ingram, who's our lead investor and our owner here, always uses this line, which is a line we used to use a lot at Liverpool, which is he never thinks of himself as the owner of Nashville Soccer Club. He thinks of himself as a custodian, because you create these teams, these clubs in these cities, particularly the cities with really good culture. You create something that belongs to the city and to the fans. So you don't really own it, because certainly in the UK or Europe, you're never going to move that team. I mean, it never happened. So you have this community asset, and I used to describe being the CEO of Liverpool. It was like carrying a Fabergé egg around in your pocket, right? Like, you had to be careful what you did with it and take really good care of it, but at the same time, you've got to keep its value moving forward, because you get left behind. And when I joined, and not disrespectfully to anyone who went before me, but the club and the team and the whole thing was a bit jaded when I joined in 2007, and it really needed an upgrade. It was like buying an old house that needed a remodel in so many areas, commercially, on the field. The stadium was a kind of, it was a big old house that needed a lot of love and attention. And so, but it's also, unlike here, where I'm building something from scratch, that thing was like driving a super tanker, to change course to something that's a club or a brand or something that people recognize is so hard, because so many people, and rightly so, have such a big opinion about everything you do. So if you want to change the stadium in a certain way, or change the way tickets are sold, or change how many sponsors you're going to have, it's so much of a drama because so many people care about it. And you have to, I learned it took a few years to get into lockstep with that, even for me, who'd supported the club my whole life, that what you actually have to do is make a plan and stick to the plan. I mean, you'll weave either side a little, but you can't change direction based on what people are saying to you, especially on social media. You know, you can't play to other people's tune. You have to create a reasonably straight line and go down it. And one of the key aspects to that, you know, and for any club and any brand, is that you have to have great owners who stick to that plan as well. And we had some difficult times, you know, with FSG when I was there. We had some difficult days and we made some mistakes, but who doesn't? But I think if you looked back over their tenure, which is now 10 plus years, you know, they generally stuck to the same plan and the same ideals. And it took a while because big change does. But here they are now enjoying the fruits of that work and a lot of work that a lot of people put in over that period. And I think it's the same with any brand. You know, you can, you know, you change the logo of a brand, whether it's a consumer brand or other, or you change the marketing strategy, all those things. Sometimes you'll get that right and sometimes you get it wrong, but you can't, you know, you wouldn't change Coca-Cola to a blue logo, just like you wouldn't change a red jersey to a blue one at Liverpool, but you can subtly weave your way to a better place and bring in new product and change. And that's what it's about. And it's different at every different club because the expectation is different, the numbers are different, the size and scale is different depending who you are. If you've 200 or 300 million fans globally, if you're Liverpool, versus, you know, however many you have at a smaller club. And it's just, but it's really about being true and respectful and authentic about the brand or the club or the entity. And you know, that's what we've tried from. It's very different here because we had nothing. So, but even then, there was an amateur team and a minor league team in Nashville before I showed up, and John and I wanted to be respectful to that. We chose to use the same colours that they'd always played in. We chose to keep a very simple name of Nashville Soccer Club. You know, they were real tributes to the history and authenticity, albeit 10 or 20 years old rather than 120 years old at Liverpool.
You know, you what you just said, I'm very friendly with John, and you're very friendly with John Ingram. You work for and with, I should say, not necessarily even for, one hell of a great human being who understands the fact that community is everything, and that unlike many sports or other forms of entertainment, you can't dictate, you have to incorporate them. Gaming is the same, by the way. We do not do anything without the community involved. We do not make changes to characters or to gameplay or to music without getting feedback from the community. I learned that from doing the theme song with you for Nashville SC, when we had you to play the song for the supporters group and to get their feedback before we ever recorded it, before it was ever released. So I have talked to John about it actually quite recently, about just what you just said, that it would have been easy to come in with a new name and different colors and some big shiny brand. But at the end of the day, that would have been detrimental to the community and the supporters who we want to grow and nurture. And it's not a marketing move. It's a genuine, heartfelt move to recognize supporters and bring them in and recognize the fact that they are responsible for the growth of what is beloved to them. Which leads me to the fact, it's a little bit of a tangent here, but football is an inclusive sport. It is not an exclusive sport. There was a time in the US when I grew up that football/soccer really was a privileged sport for suburban America, with soccer moms with fancy vans. And that's seriously not the way it has been in the rest of the world. Now, I know the answer to this question, but just for the sake of conversation, the MLS, but specifically Nashville SC, I'm continually impressed with what Nashville SC does to bring soccer to the community of Nashville. and to ensure that it's not an exclusive sport, with all due respect to people on this call who may be from Franklin or, fancy suburban communities. This isn't about exclusion. Can you just talk about some of the things that Nashville SC does to the community, or the MLS does on a national level, to make sure that reputation of soccer, and I'm using that word specifically because that's what we grew up with in America, isn't just for one group of people?
Yeah, I think it's the thing that surprised me the most in moving to the US, if I'm honest, is like in the amateur game in the UK is, give or take, is largely free, right? You can show up on the field somewhere on a Saturday, Sunday morning, whatever age you are, play for some local team, and it kind of costs you pennies rather than anything. Whereas the US in the past, and to some degree still, that amateur game has been largely driven by pay to play. So people having to, parents having to write fairly large checks for the bigger leagues to participate. And the league, and particularly ourselves here in Nashville, even before we started the MLS team, have been really trying to break through that stuff. And that's been a whole combination of things, from, strong relationships and the building of actual playing surfaces in the neighborhoods most challenged financially, let's say. So, we have one in North Nashville, which is in a predominantly African-American community, where we took an old basketball court and worked with US Soccer to reinvent that as a soccer court and put some programming in there to drive kids to play there. The refugee center here, one of the refugee centers here, which has been fantastic. And we, the grass field there, just putting some new netting around it and then in terms of where we place our facilities, we just announced very recently, we're building our huge, $30+ million practice facility investment is in Antioch, which is a predominantly Hispanic and multicultural sort of area of Nashville. And they're all very intentional, because we want those communities as much to enjoy playing the game as coming to the game. They're not mutually exclusive. They're like, it's like we want kids to enjoy it. We want kids to have access to the game, to facilities, to other things, to coaching. And we're trying to break that down. We built an academy, a youth academy. We started that 2 years ago, and it's all finished, the facilities now. We have under 17s, under 15s, under 13s, under 11s, all going on, teams, and it's all free. So nobody has to pay to play in Nashville LC's academy. Nobody has to get charged anything for those academies. It's a real opportunity for a kid in every neighborhood, not just in this city, but in this state, to make the journey through all the way to professional soccer. I mean, we will absolutely have kids at some point from that academy that pull on a yellow gold jersey and play for Nashville Soccer Club. And nobody has seen that more than myself. When I joined Liverpool in 2007, Trent Alexander-Arnold, who's, in my opinion, one of the best players in the world playing for Liverpool, was 10 years old in the academy at Liverpool when I got there. So, to see those kids running around in Williamson County in our academy right now at 10 years old is exciting. To think that kid, wherever they may be from in this country or in this city or this state, will have that journey free of charge to come and play on the ultimate stage for soccer in this country. It's one of the most exciting things about doing this job.
It's just great. Before, I don't know, Tom, if you have, I just have one more question here, assuming there might be questions from everybody. I have many questions, but I just want to get one more in. So let's talk about the U.S. women's national team. And I don't know if there's a question here, Ian, but I just want to chat with you about there's a lack of equality when it comes to pay in football, soccer. I mean, I know your character, I know your thoughts, but I'm asking you regardless, what can we do about this? What are we doing about this? It just seems wrong. So can I get your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I have kind of mixed view on it in the sense. I mean, of course, I agree that everybody should have an equal opportunity, no question. I think personally, I think US soccer dropped a massive ball with the women's national team, and what I mean by that is that the two games are at different levels at this stage in this country and maybe in every country where, you know, the number of people coming to games for men's soccer is greater. The number of people sponsoring, the numbers that sponsors are putting in is greater. The TV rights are greater. All of the above greater. So there's more revenue, and therefore the cost base has, like any business, right? The cost base has to be associated with the revenue base. But the fundamental difference in the question I think you posed is like US men's national team, women's national team, you know, they're more successful, the women's team. So when they're representing their country, they should at least, if not a greater opportunity of earning, in my opinion. I think it's hard to do the same. You know, it's a bit like not every player in every team in every league gets paid the same, right? There's minimums and maximums, but well, not maximums, mostly minimums. But I think you have to find the right bridge, and at the national level, international level, I mean, I just don't get it. I don't get why they didn't say, look, here's the revenue we're generating. We should be playing, you know, perhaps the most successful international women's team ever. And so why is there even a debate about it? I just think they dropped the ball literally by not doing that. And I think I love the women's. I started, was one of the people who started the professional women's team at Liverpool. And, you know, we took that very seriously. We invested heavily into that. And of course, not invested the same number as investing in a team that generates almost $1 billion of revenue, but invested heavily. And the team won the league for the first 2 years. I mean, it was a super strong team. And then, of course, other teams woke up to that, started investing more, the Chelseas and Man Cities. And all of a sudden, the game in that country is now at a different level. And I think you've got to match revenue with opportunity, but you've also got to match success with reward, right? So if they're going to be as successful as they absolutely have been, and an incredible group of women in the US team, they should be rewarded accordingly, totally, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for saying that. I think we all need to acknowledge that you are correct. The US women's national team is one of the most important reasons for the success of the sport in North America. And I think we need to, the fact that they have to come out and fight, or, you know, bring even up the subject of equity when it equal pay is astonishing. That doesn't, I'm not saying that as on a global basis. I'm not making commentary. I'm not in that business, but I think it feels sometimes like they're undervalued. But those of us in the football business, wow, do I see the influence. It's really incredible. What about fans, young girls? What does it look like? How do do we have many? I know that about 20 or 30% of people that play FIFA, the game, are young women. Where do we see that when it comes to the sport itself? What are we doing about it?
You know, I'm not as plugged into Premier League soccer or European soccer these days as I was. In this country, I'm blown away in such a positive sense by the audience we see. And I see, obviously, I'm in and around our stadium every game and some of the games on the road, and it's so warming that it's almost hard to say there are more girls than boys, there are more families than individual. It's such a big mix, and literally, you know, a representation of every ethnicity you can imagine. And I think it's so encouraging, right? In the year we've just been through and all of the other social challenges and other things. I mean, genuinely, wherever you live, if you're watching this, go watch a soccer match, particularly in this country. And it's heartwarming for me. It's almost like, you know, we all know what the challenges are in society, but it's almost like you can go and have some respite there. And and feel like people are stood together, standing together, singing together. Nobody cares what your gender choices are, or your this or that or the other, religious choices. They're just all in there supporting the same team, enjoying that 90 minutes and having a great time. And wow, wouldn't it be great if society could be that easy? But it's a real thing. I think because it's such a widely supported support from all over the world. And even if somebody was born in this country, chances are one or other of their parents or grandparents came from a soccer or football dominant country. And we all hand that stuff off, right? All my kids support teams because, I sort of made them, although my eldest son's a Newcastle fan, so I have no idea what happened there. But
that's
genuinely, I just love the mix, the mix, the atmosphere, the inclusiveness. Like, our fans are amazing, and they literally represent every piece of society, and it's so heartwarming.
Well, I would like to think that if you really wanted to see what the future of this country looks like, go to an MLS game and look around the stands. That's what the future of this country looks like. Diversity and inclusion, represented by 30, 40, 50,000 people who come together to chant and cheer, as one. But nobody looks the same, nobody acts the same, nobody needs to be in the same, nobody needs to pray to the same God. It's a beautiful collection of diversity, and I think that's what makes this sport, frankly, so wonderful and beautiful. It just doesn't feel the same in other places. So I did, however, have a job interview that I gave somebody. I'm trying to hire somebody, and in the middle of the interview, FIFA came up and they said they were a Man U fan. So I am second guessing hiring this person. I'm just letting you know. I really have a problem with that.
I would think much less of you if you hired a Manchester
United. The sport of football came up and they said, just don't tell me you're a Scouser. And I'm like, we may have a problem here. Tom, is there, I've got more questions. I can talk to you all day, but I am ignoring the chat. So I was, maybe I don't want to ignore people that are here.
We've got a couple of really good ones, and Ian, these are directed to you and related to the new stadium that you're overseeing the construction of. Couple of different questions, but pointing at the same topic, and that is the inclusion of live music in and around the games themselves, as well as standalone concert events. Can you comment on what's going on?
Sure. Yeah, great question. So we building a new stadium, 30,000 seats, be the largest soccer-specific stadium in the US. And music is music, food, and football. That's kind of the mix.
Beer. Don't forget beer.
Oh yeah, that goes without saying. That's available always. But no, on the outside of the stadium, on the north end, we have a 60,000 square foot event square that was purposely put there. It's got a huge screen, so pre-game, live music, food trucks, bring that all to life before you even come into the stadium. In the stadium, a real kind of mix of genres of music in different concourses. We're building a stage in the upper north eastern corner, so that a performance stage for pre-game, halftime, so the ability to have somebody play live music in the bowl. And then in the south end of which is where all the back of house locker rooms, we've built, the steelwork is built to take the full concert rig and stage. We have 5 locker rooms in that end, so we only need 2, obviously, for a normal soccer, but built so that we can have artist dressing rooms, power phasings all built to take concerts. We've already ordered the pitch cover for the concerts. We already have a deal with Live Nation to help us bring concerts. That thing will be right in the sweet spot between Bridgestone Arena for live events and Nissan Stadium for live events. So, 60 plus at Nissan to, 16, 17, 18 at Bridgestone. And then we sit right in the middle, which is perfect for Nashville. And, we did a lot of work on trying to create what we term here at this soccer club as the festival of soccer. So all the music people on here and out there you go to for me, you go to a concert because you know that band, you know all their songs, you can kind of sing along to everything, right? And that's what you do when you go to a festival. You go for the whole experience. You go for the food and the music and the crowd and all, and a lot of drinking in my experience. But we want the soccer to be a little like that. We know that we already have the hardcore soccer fans. What we have to do is bring everyone else to this amazing time. So music and different genres and different experiences at different times. Maybe a DJ in the event square post game. So as you come out from the game, you kind of wind down with that or keep going. And then food, we have a very different deal for the food at our stadium than most teams do, which gives us control of what we're selling and the mix of what we're selling and the choices that we're selling. And so it's easy to talk about and more important to deliver it, but it's going to be something pretty special.
Very cool. And Steve, this is a question sort of directed at you, but I want to hear Ian's input on it. And that is the way you go about selecting music to go into your game, specifically FIFA. And is it singles driven, or do you ever foresee a day where you may incorporate full-on albums into EA?
Well, it's a great question. When I hear the word singles driven, I know this person didn't imply this, but it's not about singles that suddenly go on the radio and things like that. It is about finding great songs. It is about finding great songs on a global level. It is everything we've talked about here about diversity in music and genre on a global level. Possibly full albums in the future. I believe as we move towards the cloud in my space, and we become more of a streaming service and less of a purchase, you're going to see the opportunity for updates and lots of dynamic musical experiences on a 24/7 basis. But, I've been at EA for 20 years, and I'm really proud that the music of FIFA, through all the research we do, through all the feedback we get from fans, is usually in the top 2 or 3 most important categories of what brings them to the game itself. I'm not ever expecting to, overtake the players and the teams and the gameplay. But at the end of the day, what we hope to represent is the global culture of the sport. The fact that it isn't just an American experience, isn't just a UK experience. It actually may be just like music, the one common thing that brings people together that otherwise may not be necessarily supposed to be together. People are told we're not a matter of being separated by politics or governments. Music is the great connector. And if we represent what soccer sounds like, and I mean football there, in Italy or the UK or Brazil or Japan or the US, we bring it together. Hopefully we can represent culturally and even lead the culture on what the sport means itself to bring people together. I mean, like I've said at the beginning, I'm from here and I'm in love with Premier League, and I've been to the World Cup in Brazil, and I plan to go to the World Cup in Qatar next year. I'm a fanatic. I don't look at it where it's existing, what governments are behind it. I just don't see it that way. So we use music and utilize music in the same way. It's to bring people together. I hope that answers the question.
Amen. Amen. Guys, we have time for just a couple more minutes. Ian, I always love to ask our guests about their own musical preferences. I see a guitar behind you there. Who are some of your favorite artists besides your Liverpool?
Yeah, well, this is the famous Gibson Nashville SC guitar. It's got our logo on it. And so every game, for those who haven't seen our games, we have a different artist that Gibson help us with come out and kind of play a riff right at the kickoff of the game, which has become our thing and recognized throughout the league. So we've had Lizzie Hale, Dave Mustaine, John Oates, we just have all these people going. It's a really cool part. I've always loved music. I would say I have a really kind of broad mix of tastes. Of course, that small band from Liverpool, the Beatles, and particularly Lennon were a big influence. I loved, Bowie and Elvis Costello. Got to know and really love, and Foo Fighters, Chili Peppers. That's kind of my jam. I became this big Oasis fan, I think, because I was just probably 10 years the wrong side to really enjoy the Beatles growing up in Liverpool, and they were very Beatles influenced. I really loved that, and then I moved here, and I thought, being honest, I thought coming here that it was going to be all country music, and but Nashville's such a, as you guys know better than me, such a mix of genres, and I really love live music. So if you're going to love live music, what a city to live in. And in the last couple of years, I found myself listening to a lot. I do most of my music listening in the car, and listening to bands that I would never have either found or listened to. South of Eden, I really liked a new band, and Blackstone Cherry, and Kentucky band, and just stuff that I would never have heard of in the UK. And so I love that I got to open up my kind of musical world by being here. And for the stadium, like one of the things, we talked a lot about fans, and you kind of got to play to a very mixed audience. So we'll have a little bit of everything, and we try to do that, get players involved in doing playlists, and fans, and and everybody's slightly different, right? And I love that. Like I say, it's like a festival. So you go into a festival, a little bit of everything, and we don't sort of just follow a particular genre for the team, because again, whether it's our play, I think we have 16 different nationalities in our player group. So you get them to do some playlists, you've got a pretty mixed bag. But it's great, and we're in the Music City, so the anthem and the guitar riff kind of fit with that very much.
Well, this was a part of our thinking from the beginning, right, Ian, where we made a specific effort to determine that the sound, the tone of this team would represent Nashville, not represent a specific niche of Nashville. It would represent musically the entirety of Nashville. How Nashville is thought of on a global scale. Nashville isn't just this to people in Berlin or the UK or California. It's this. And whether it's Kings of Leon, or whether it's Black Keys, or or whether it's Americana music, whether it's Chris Stapleton, or whether it's whatever, we could go on the list all day long, but it was going to represent all of Nashville. And I think they're doing it quite well. I do have to tell you, Ian, that I got a promo piece about 15, 20 years ago from Oasis that I was really proud of. I couldn't believe they sent me this beautiful jacket until I turned it around. It was a Man City jacket. So I gave it away and decided not to be a fan of the band anymore. That's how devoted I am to Liverpool. I gave up a band.
Well, my two favorite Oasis stories. One is very recent, which is I've become very good friends with JC and Cesar at Gibson Guitars, and so they knew how big an Oasis fan was. So they just did a new edition of the J150, a signature Noel Gallagher, and I was able to buy one of that very short limited edition, which I play it almost every day. I love it so much. But the funny one was the story that Wayne Rooney, who famously played for Manchester United, the opposite team to Manchester City, who the band are fans of. His wife sent Noel and Liam a guitar for them to sign for Wayne's birthday. And they stripped the whole thing down, painted the whole thing in Man City colours, and then sent it back with, happy birthday. So a great story, and shows, true to the rivalry of soccer, like, everyone's always trying to stick it to you if you're from the other team.
Well, gentlemen, I'm afraid we're out of time, but just let me say how awesome this has been. I could let this go on for 2 more hours, and I know the audience would enjoy it as much as I would, but I really tip my hat to the smart things you guys have done in both of your fields, by the way. Steve, you have taken video games and music to astronomical level. And Ian, the things that you've done both on little nuanced things as well as the big things, you're checking every single box and doing so many things so smartly. And your success is not, unsurprised, surprisingly at all. Great job by both of you. Thank you. Please keep doing it.
Ian, I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, my friend. Take it easy. Thanks, everybody.
Bye,
to
everyone.
the audience, thank you for coming. Get your shots and get out there and buy some tickets to music, soccer, football, and video games. Cheers, folks.
Thank you.